men are struggling, it seems.
Yes.
I think, the more and more I talk on this show about dating apps and what it's like to be a man in this dating climate, especially one that's become more digitalized than ever before, the conversation always emerges in the sort of like the comment sections and stuff about men's struggles here.
Mm-hmm.
Because, these dating apps, they seem to be not well designed for the like bottom 50% of men.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm with you. What I like about the conversation today is we're finally acknowledging it's okay to acknowledge that, men are getting crapped on. I feel like just a year ago, if you said that, oh no, what are you talking about? We're still in the patriarchy. You can't. No, men are struggling. High suicide rates, highest levels of loneliness, highest issues around mental health. Men are struggling. And the fact that we can just talk about that and all acknowledge, okay, let's figure out how to deal with this is a good place to begin. Right. But now we have to begin. It begins with the awareness and talking about it. It extends into creating safe spaces for men to be able to talk. I love that what you see now is you see these podcast communities creating these spaces where men feel like they can be acknowledged and seen. And that allows for there to be connection with other men going through those same challenges, which creates camaraderie and helps you to break out of that loneliness. So we're on the path, but we have to acknowledge some of those larger trends that we see. I know Richard Reeves talks about this quite a bit. Phenomenal book of Boys and Men, where you can see just the levels of unemployment, the lower levels of educational attainment for men, the high levels of drug usage, the high levels of what Richard Reeves calls sedation, essentially, is drug usage, pornography watching, where you have a large number of men just sedating themselves out of pain, right, out of loneliness. And so I think we're in a great place to begin working on the problem, but it's a hell of a problem.
In your book on page 72, it says that in the Tinder research, you found that one of the main reasons men aren't in relationships is because of rejection.
Yes.
Fear of rejection.
Yes. Number one. And many people would laugh at that. They would laugh at that stat. What? Men walk up to me all the time. So how is it that men are fearful of rejection? But the fact of the matter is that the majority of men report the number one reason why they believe they can't find a significant other is the fear of being rejected. Think about that. And that's not just in person. That's online, feeling as if you are going to deny me, you're going to reject me. And to me, that speaks to self-esteem. To me, that speaks to self-love. To me, that speaks to self-worth. And so therefore, we have to really evaluate the why. The why is that? But I think this is such an important point. And this is why we have to look back. Let's look at history. Why is it the case that the Calvin Klein model, or why is it the case that the higher status person gets more interaction? If you think back to pragmatic, right? If you were a woman, what did you need to survive?
I needed a mate that would protect me.
Exactly. Now, the protection would come in one of two things.
And I say that because at some point I'm going to be 8.5 months pregnant, and I ain't going to be able to hunt or forage, or I don't know.
Exactly. And so you need to have the protection. And the protection came in one of two ways. One, physicality, right? Someone's just strong and could fight. But the other was high social status.
Resources, which would bring resources.
Which would bring resources. And therefore, you'd have the protection because of that. So how long did that continue?
Yeah, most of human history.
Most of human history. So we have, through evolution, this has been indoctrinated into our system. And what is rarely talked about is, there were millions of men throughout history who were not the Calvin Klein, not the biggest, didn't have the social status. So what happened to them in history? Do you know what happened to them? Most of them? They were the ones sent to war. These were the men fighting for whatever country. These were the men. When you watch Napoleon and you see, oh my God, the Battle of Waterloo, you had tens of thousands of people. Who's dying? It's those men. It's not the high status men. It's not the Calvin Klein looking, right? It's those men were dying. And we've reached a point in society where we're no longer fighting wars like that. We're fighting with drones and missiles. You have millions upon millions upon millions of men sitting there saying, okay, now what about me? What about me? And this is the problem. This is where we are.
What about men? What were they selecting for?
They were selecting for youth.
Fertility.
Yeah. They wanted youth, which spoke to fertility. And that ran through time. And that's the reason why you see a woman who, I talk about this in the book, there's this golden mean.
Golden mean. I read this and it was the first time I'd ever heard of this idea of the golden mean, but it was super interesting.
The golden mean.
It explained why my girlfriend seems to like my shoulders. She doesn't care if I get fat. I swear to you, I asked her one day, I was like, what do you prefer? Because she asked me, she said, what features do you prefer on me? And obviously I knew that was a trap. So I said everything. I'm not stupid. But then when she asked the question, I asked her the question back. I was like, what features do you prefer on me? She was like, your shoulders.
Yeah.
And I was like, really? I was like, I thought they said you wanted, like, I thought women wanted a six pack. She was like, she was holding my shoulders. She was like, your shoulders.
Yes.
And then I read this golden mean thing in your book and I was like, ah.
Yeah. That's how I could, it's interesting. I spot everyone and I almost am calculating golden mean because I'm always thinking as a matchmaker, like I can match that. So the golden mean has stood throughout history. And there's a different calculation for men and women. For women, the calculation is the difference between waist and hips, right? So it's the percentage of your waist to your hips. So if on average, your waist is 70% of what your hips are, that is considered to be fertile, right? You're considered to be at optimal, you're optimal for fertilization in essence. And you could see that ratio tested throughout time, and you could see that ratio tested throughout culture, which is rare to go to an Eastern collectivist society and see something similar to what's happening in a Western individualistic society. And so the golden mean stands through time. And the reason why it's so interesting is because you look at like Twiggy in the 1970s, I think, in the UK, and you say, gosh, Twiggy was so thin, but she still had a 70% golden mean. You look at people talk about the Kim Kardashians of the world. She has less than 70%. She's probably like 50%, right, golden mean. And so the golden mean is the optimal measure of what we just consider to be fertile, therefore sexy on average.
And so that hasn't been influenced by, magazines and media and stuff like that. That's just, scientists think that's innate. Humans.
Yes, they think that that's innate, but it is impacted by culture. So you go into different subcultures, and there might be more of an exaggeration of the golden mean, right? So maybe it's more than 70%, or should I say less than 70%, could be what's considered more attractive. So it is influenced, but on average, that is it. And the reason why I say that is it is because many men would argue, oh no, you'll say, oh, what are you? You're a breast man, you're a leg man, like what is it? Like it's a Thanksgiving dinner, you know what I mean? And those could be characteristics and features that you find sexy and attractive. But on average, this is what will light up most men. And then for women, when they're looking at a man, the golden mean is the difference between shoulders and waist. And so if your waist is 70% or less than your shoulders, then that is considered to be what? Someone who could protect me. That's where that comes from, and therefore throughout hundreds of thousands of years of history, we get to the point where, okay, it's sexy. Why is it sexy? I don't know. He just looks sexy. No, the reason why he looks sexy is because ultimately back in the day, he could have been a protector. So that's where that comes from. And in the matchmaking community, what I used to do all the time is if I had a client who was, say a male client and he didn't really represent the golden mean, I'd say, put on this blazer here, wide shoulder pad blazer, go out there on that date. So the golden mean is something that has stood the test of time.
So many people are going to be doing like shoulder pressing tonight. That's crazy.
That's all you need to do.
Yeah, just a little bit of shoulder press.
That's it.
That's so crazy. But it makes evolutionary sense that there is it proportions the right word that we would associate with fertility or protection. What's this concept in chapter 4 you talk about? The concept of mate value.
This is. I feel like the whole book now is controversial. This
I'll give a quick disclaimer.
Yeah,
this is his book, not mine.
This is another topic that a lot of people want to push back on. Right? Mate value is a evolutionary psychology term that is around technically what value do we bring to the mating marketplace? Because when you think about our evolution is that we go on one or two paths in mating. We call it dating, evolutionary, they're calling it mating. Long-term mating or short-term mating, right? Now, short-term mating is a separate beast. Short-term mating is literally, I want to have sex tonight. Therefore, you're going to look at different characteristics. You're not going to care if you can trust the person. You're not going to care. You're going to look at what they look like, and that really might not mean anything to you. That's short-term mating. Long-term mating is much different. Long-term mating is okay, I'm looking for a partner for life. And part of the calculation that we're doing, innately, the calculation that we're doing is what do we value the person? It's no different than someone saying, oh yeah, he's a 9. Or she's a 10, 10 out of 10. She's a 10. In essence, that's what mate value is. But I look at mate value as all of the ingredients that we bring to the table. So yes, it is about physically how we look. It is about status in our job. Yeah, that's important. But it's also about how kind we are. It's also about our behavior. It's also about how confident we are when we walk into a room. All of these pieces add up to mate value. But the reason why I say it's so important to know is because mate value will also change based on the context. For example, if I take, you're going to be my reference here. If I take you, Stephen, and I bring you to Richmond, Virginia, where my wife is from, and we go to a restaurant, you walk in, everyone is mesmerized by you the moment you open your mouth.
Yeah, amazing.
Everyone is.
Where is it?
Richmond.
Got a postcode. Richmond.
Peg a note here. Everyone is. The moment that you speak, wow, I've never heard an accent like that. Tell me more about you, right? They're intrigued. It's what I call the premium effect that lands on top of the mate value, right? But we have to understand that there is a value that we assign people when we are mating or dating.
You conveniently skipped over the one about having kids.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no. But so having kids, it goes up, or it brings your value up, or it brings your value down. Now, it depends on what your partner is seeking. So so chances are, let's say that you are a woman, you have children, and you are you're dating a man who does not yet have children and wants to have children. Chances are that is going to lower, in his eyes, on average, that's going to lower your perceived mate value. However, if he has children, or maybe he's a little bit older, or for whatever the reason, he could look at that as an upside. The point there, though, is that it's the context that changes your mate value. And that's very important. The context is what changes it.
So this premium effect you talked about then when you're talking about Richmond, Virginia, how can one use that to increase my chance of finding someone to fall in love with? And just give a bit of color on what you mean by the premium effect. Is it being a scarce commodity in a certain environment?
Yeah, that's exactly.
Or a desirable commodity in a certain environment?
It's being scarce.
Scarce, okay.
Yeah. So when we started the matchmaking agency, it was focused exclusively for Black women. And the reason why is because I felt as if Black women were being highly discriminated against in the matchmaking space. And so I was trying everything. And so I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start putting my clients on dating apps and I will act as them. And I saw that they were not getting traction.
Is that statistically proven? I'd love to know.
Yeah. You know, I will say from all of my experience in matchmaking, it was.
That Black women got less matches on dating apps, less swipes.
In my time, when I was running that dating agency, absolutely. Hands down. There was no question.
Why?
Well, you know, there's lots of reasons. One reason is that when it comes to outside of Gen Z, so if you look at millennials, you look at Gen X, you look at baby boomers, and at that time, Gen Z wasn't yet on dating apps. We're talking about millennials and higher. We typically choose ethnicity over every other category. So ethnicity ended up being one of the first selections of a partner. And we would either we would either include you or exclude you based on ethnicity. Gen Z has changed this, and I'm so happy to see this. Gen Z is the first generation to, at majority, have interest in everyone. So on Tinder, for example, we see that 80% of our Gen Z, they are not just open, but they have dated someone outside of their ethnicity. And I believe that we're entering this new phase of what I call, we are inter-everything. We are inter-ethnic, international, interreligious. That to me is beautiful. But that didn't happen for millennials. It definitely didn't happen for Gen X, and definitely not for baby boomer. So ethnicity was number one. So because of that, and because of the pools of Black men on dating apps of that age range were so much smaller that you saw a very small selection rate for Black women. So that's what was driving the low perceived interest. But what I didn't like what was happening is you would see this data come out, Black women are not selected or not swiped on or whatever it may be, and it would be projected as Black women are not desirable, which is like the most ridiculous thing in the world. I was like, what are you talking about? But the reason why is because they were taking these small data sets and essentially claiming this larger narrative based on this small data set. And so when I was experimenting with those, with my clients, I then said, okay, what would happen if I put my Black female clients onto J-Date, right? Jewish date, and they were not Jewish. Like they were ultra Christian, right? What would happen? So I started putting them on J-Date. Phenomenal success. Phenomenal success. There was a percentage of people who responded who were crude. Why are you here? There was a percentage of people who responded who were obviously fetishizing. Oh, I want to do this to you, right? But then there was a percentage of people who were just curious. Let's see. That's interesting. Why are you here? Like, let's have this conversation. And the interactions were plentiful. And what I realized there was a premium effect being assigned. There was a extra value that they got by being this scarce commodity in this space. And so my objective with a lot of my clients was to take them and put them in places where they are few.
That's so interesting. And we can do that IRL as well. We can put ourselves in situations where we're scarce in real life. Is it going to like a different type of sports club, or what is that?
Yeah. So I try this out here. I have a friend who lives in Hertfordshire, She is a white woman, friend, 30, mid-30s, completely open to meeting everyone, right? She's like, Paul, I'm single. I don't know what to do. I said, all right, here's what you do. Come on down to South London. I want you to go to this exhibit that's happening at the Black Cultural Archives in Brixton. And I want you to go down there. And you just tell me what happened. She went down. She was like, oh my God, it was crazy. I met blah, 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 blah. And the point was that she put herself in a place where she was a quote unquote scarce commodity. If you want to look at it in economic terms, which I like, that's exactly what she did. And she met incredible people. Now, did she have romantic connection there? No, but she walked out of there with 2 friends that she's kept in touch with, for a year plus. So think about where your interests lie, but where you can step out and be different, where you could be unique. You can do that in every aspect of your life. But you know what the underlying driver is to being able to do that? Is self-esteem. Because the higher self-esteem you have, the less external validation you need.
Less you need to conform to the environment.
Exactly. Even there's some great studies that show that the higher self-esteem you have, the less you need to have someone who's traditionally attractive.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because you start to see all of the value, all the beautiful nature and behaviors and physicality of someone. And you don't need to walk down the street and have everyone say, he looks like, he's so beautiful or she's so beautiful. You have value in that person. So therefore, and so high self-esteem is indicative of so many aspects of our life. And you could show up, get that premium effect if you have high self-esteem.
I've never heard anyone talk about this before, and that is so interesting. Because I was, every time I hear an idea, I think we all at home, everyone listening to this will kind of sense check the concept on like friends they know and people they know. And I would say that of everybody I know, the people that are typically lower self-esteem are those that are most focused on appearances and looks. Yes. In fact, there's one of my friends who, when he called me one day in the gym and said, I'm not sure about his current partner. And I was like, why, what's up? He goes, like when I walk into a restaurant with her on my arm, I just don't know how it looks. Literally, that's what he said to me. And I remember having the conversation with him like, bro, you are screwed if that's what you're judging this individual based on how they look on your arm.
Yes.
But it's a consequence of his own need for validation from the person he's with. And then it's no surprise that the other correlation you see is those people are probably still single. Those are my friends that are still single. The ones that care the most about that can currently have the lowest self-esteem are also the ones that are still missing probably great people for looking at the wrong things.
There you go. That's why we need to be in a state of flourishing ourselves before we go out there. Because think, if he was able to just take a breather, work on his self-esteem.
Facts.
There's so many things you could do, boost your self-esteem. Think of how incredible his next relationship would be.
Facts.
Yeah. Yeah. Self-esteem is really where it's at. Like it's underrated.
That's so interesting, this idea that when we have low self-esteem, we'll care more about how the person looks because we believe that they can boost our self-esteem by just being next to them. That's crazy.
Yeah. And well, more so, we believe that society accepts them and we won't be shamed by society as a result of being with them, right? Because we want the validation from society when we have low self-esteem. But if you have high self-esteem, you say, you know what? This is my partner. And I don't care what you think. It doesn't matter what you think. I'm happy.
Yeah.
Then you can walk down the street with anyone.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.